the Academic Podcast Agency.
Welcome to the Whitetail Stories podcast, a podcast exploring audio storytelling in all its wondrous forms and why we as humans feel compelled to do such an act. I'm Daniel, I'm a storyteller, story lover, and I'm the creative director at the Story Museum in Oxford.
And my name's Will Hurd. I am a story lover, podcast maker, documentary filmmaker, and we're very excited to be back in your ears for episode 5, which I believe, after some deliberation, is going to be an introduction to the crazy world and sonic stylings of Lord Buckley.
That's correct. We're going to listen to the Naz. Lord Buckley was a cabaret performer who became a recording artist. It's a strange record in that it's the retelling of the Jesus and Nazareth story, but in this very odd cross between Southern Baptist minister and hipster jazz musician speak.
Do we know much about Lord Buckley? Tell me, what decade are we in for this piece of work?
So he died in 1960. It was the 40s and 50s. He kind of had this kind of character that was almost like a preacher, kind of like a hipster preacher. He was a sort of stand-up performer and inspired many people after him, including Dizzy Gillespie, including people like Lenny Bruce. And even the track that we're hearing today inspired the Beatles to write Hey Jude.
Wow, okay. So you're saying he was, you used the phrase stand-up there, but you don't necessarily mean comedian. You mean, but he was doing nightclubs with this material, was he?
Yeah, he was a performer, and there was a series of records he made, or series of tracks that he made, where he was retelling classic stories, but in kind of hipster language. So he had a small ensemble backing him. But the score is gorgeous, you'll hear it in a minute. But he retold these kind of classic stories, but in hipster language. And this one is the story of the Naz.
The Naz by Lord Buckley. Let's have a listen. Here we go.
Yeah, here I is again. That's me. And there's you. And I dig all you cats out there whipping and wailing and jumping up and down and sucking up that fine juice and patting each other on the back and telling each other who the greatest cat in the world is. Mr. Malenkov, Mr. Dalenkov, Mr. Eisenhower, Woosen, Wiesen, Meisen, Wooser, and Mr. Woodhill, and Mr. Beachhill, and Mr. Churchill, and all them hills, they gonna get it straight. If they can't straighten it, they know a cat that knows a cat that's gonna get it straight. Well, I'm gonna put a cat on you was the sweetest, gonest, wailingest cat that ever stomped on this sweet swinging sphere. And they called this your cat the Naz. That was the cat's name. He was a carpenter kitty. Now the Naz was a kind of a cat that come on so wild and so sweet and so strong and so witted that when he laid it, wham, it stayed there. Naturally, all the rest of the cat looked to see what he putting down. He said, man, look at that cat blow. Let the cat go there, man. Look, get out the way. He said, man, don't bug me. Get off my back. I'm trying to dig what the cat's seeing. Jack said, cool. They're pushing the Naz because they want to dig his lick, you see, dig his miracle lick. So the Naz say, wait a minute, babies. Tell you what I'm going to do. I ain't gonna take 2 for 680 you cats, but I'm gonna take 12 you studs and straighten you all at the same time. You cats look like you pretty hip boys. You buddy with me. So the Naz and his buddies was goofing off down the boulevard one day, and they run into a little cat with a bent frame. So the Naz look at this little cat with a bent frame and he say, what's the matter with you, baby? And the little cat with the bent frame, he say, well, my frame is bent, Naz. It's been bent for me in front. So the Naz look at the little cat with the bent frame and he put the golden eyes of love on this here little kitty and he looked right down into the windows of his soul and he said to the little cat, he say, straighten it. Cat went up straighter than now, and everybody jumping up and down say, look what the Naz put on that boy. You dug him before, dig him now. Yes, I can feel it. Now you see the Naz are coming on so strong and so fine and so great. Talking about when's he going to appear next. What did he do there? He put it down once for the cat. The cat dug it, didn't dig it. Put it down twice, dug it, didn't dig it. Put it down the third time, the cat dug it. Wham! Walked away with his eyes bugging out here, there, bumping into everybody. Naz coming on so fine and so strong. They're pulling on his coattail. They want him to sign the autograph. They want him to do this gig here. They want him to do that gig there. They want to make it the radio, the video, and all that jazz. He can't make all that jazz. Like I explained to the cats, the carpenter kid has got his own lick. But when he know he should show to blow and cannot go, because he got some strain on him, he sends a couple of these cats did his straightening. So came a little old 50-cent gig one day, and the Naz couldn't make it, so he put it on two of these cats. He said, boss, go straighten that little riff over there. Boss said, take it off your mind, Naz, we got it covered. So on the way over, the boss run into a little old 20-cent pool of water, and he gets right in the middle of the boat, and all of a sudden, blam, a thunderstorm, the lightning flashing and the thunder roaring, and the boat going up and down, and the poor cats thinking every minute gonna be the last, and one cat look up, and here come the Naz. Cool as anyone you ever see, right across the water, walking. And the Naz is a little boy on board. I think his name is Jude on board the boat. He say, hey, Naz, can I make it out there with you? Naz say, make it, Jude. And old Jude went stomping off that boat, took about 4 steps, dropped his whole cotton. The Naz had to stash him back on board again. So the Naz look at these kiddies and he say, what's the matter with you babies now? I said, what's going on here, boys? I said, what's taking place? I said, what's all this fuss about here? What's going on? I said, man, I said, what's going on? I said, can't you see the storm and the lightning flashing and the thunder roaring? And the Naz say, I told you stay cool, didn't I, babies? Now the fame of the Naz is jumping. The grapevine is shooting out sparks 40 feet long, and they're talking about what he said. And I stood up to all these big bad cats and dug all that bad jazz and put him all down. And what he said he's going to do and where he's going to be and how he's going to be, till the grapevine is jumping so bad, there is now 16,000 of these studs and kiddies in the Naz's little hometown where the cat lived, looking to get straight. Well, the Naz know he can't straighten them all. There's too small a place to want to hang everybody up. Nobody can make it. So the Naz look out at these 16,000 studs and kiddies and they say to them, come on, babies. Just got on out down the road. And there went the Naz, swinging away ahead of all these studs and kiddies and 16,000, stomping up a big swinging beat behind him. And our great necklace of love is supercharging and charging to him. And oh, it's brother to brother and sister to sister. And the Naz is stomping on a sweet swinging beat, going down the road. And Naz talking about how pretty the flowers, how pretty the hours, how pretty me, how pretty you, how pretty he, how pretty she. Naz had them pretty eyes. He wanted everybody to see through his eyes so they could see how pretty it was. And they're having such a wailing, gorgeous Mardi Gras time that before you know it, it was scorpion time, and these poor cats is 42 miles out of town. Ain't nobody got the first biscuit. Well, the Naz look at these cats, and they say they're kicking the sand out there. The Naz say, you hungry, ain't you, babies? I say, yeah, Naz. We digging you so hard at what you're putting down that we didn't prepare, Naz. We goofed. Yes, that's what you call it. So the Naz say, well, we got to take it easier. We wouldn't want to go ahead and order up something you might not like, would we? And they say, no, Naz, You put it down, and we'll pick it up. So the Naz stepped back a few paces, and he said, "Oh, great swinging flowers of the fields." And they said, "Oh, great non-stop singular sound of beauty." And the Naz said, "Stamp upon the terror." And they hit it, and the Naz say, "Straighten your miracle the body." The body went up, and he said, "Straighten your arms." The arms went up, and he said, "Higher." And the arms went higher, and the Naz say, "Dig infinity." And they dug it. And when they did, wham! The thunder went through, and they look in the left hand, is a great big sweet stuffed smoked fish, and in the other a big thick loaf of that gone crazy honey tasting non-stop sweet swinging southern bread. Why, these polecats flipped. Naz never did nothing simple. When he laid it, he laid it. Say, when the saints marching in,
go marching in.
When the saints go marching in,
Hallelujah!
I want to be in that number. The saints go marching in. Say, when the saints marching in,
Go marching in.
where the saints go march rubber in.
Hallelujah!
I wants to be in that number. The saints go marching rubber in.
Wow. That's absolutely insane. So,
Isn't it something?
So it is something. I don't even know where to begin. So he's adopting a kind of Southern Baptist preacher vibe, right?
Crossed with a kind of hipster jazz speak 1940s kind of fast talking, all of it.
So he was white because he sounds very black, right? He's got a very James Brown preacher kind of vibe going on.
But he was a white. His father was from Manchester.
Oh, really?
He was, and came over on a boat, and he was a white American who was his. If you see, it was worth looking at pictures of him. He looks like a kind of like English royalty almost, with a twiddly moustache. He was and he wore a pith helmet and things. So he had this. I think essentially he was a guy who grew up in the 30s as on stage at cabarets and built this cabaret act, this kind of persona over 20 years, and these recordings were made in the sort of early to mid 50s, and he made this kind of series of tracks that were retelling old stories. He did Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, and he did one on Gandhi, and this one, which is the Naz, which is based on Jesus of Nazareth, but in this very affected and brilliantly done kind of hipster Baptist minister kind of speak. Bizarre.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that is part of the whole Southern religious preaching thing, is because he's telling the religious story. I mean, on the first listen, I got to be honest, I find it quite difficult to follow. But is he essentially telling the story of Christ? Is that what you take to? Yeah, okay.
That's exactly what's happening. I mean, it's got that thing that great storytellers have, that is just great rhythm and propulsion. In a way, it doesn't matter what he's saying.
Right.
It doesn't, do you know what I mean? It's like, yes, that story's in there.
He's so into it, isn't he? He's full of the spirit. Yeah. And it's probably made stronger, I guess, by the fact that the literal understanding of what he's saying is obscured almost by his enthusiasm for what he's trying to share with you.
Totally. And by the language that he's using. And in opposed to so the last episode we were listening to Ken Nordine, who's we were identifying, sits in this place where he is he speaks in a way that it almost is sitting on the beat, but it doesn't feel like music. He is the he relates to the score in a really fascinating way, like a jazz musician. But Lord Buckley sits another way, where his voice is the music, his voice is the rhythm, it is the beat, and the musicians are playing in such a way that they sit underneath it. So it's almost the flip opposite of Nordine. It's
fascinating, that idea. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well, in various different contexts where you come across people that are good public speakers and bad public speakers. And I've always had an interest with, watching people that are good public speakers. I'm sure many of us enjoy that. But it seems to me it's not dependent most of the time on the actual content of what's being said. And I've always had a fascination with that, because there's this idea, isn't there, that only in any communication, only 10% or something like that is the actual words that are being used. So it's all the context, it's the timbre, it's the pacing, the meter. That's where so much of the meaning of communication comes from. And I think when you get great orators, whether they be good or bad, right? You think of Churchill's speeches, or, any big towering characters of history, Hitler making his those terrifying speeches that you see in those old black and white showreels. Not understanding the words again, but you can hear the insane devotion that his delivery manages to inspire, right? So there's something really fascinating about that, I think. The fact that stories are so much more than their literal takeaway meaning.
It's the use of rhythm in his speech, the way that everything has this meter, everything is going somewhere, everything is building up all the time, and the musicians, all of the pieces of the puzzle work together to take you on this journey. And it's a rhythmic, tonal and excitement journey that you go on. That doesn't even make sense, but it does make sense. But it's like... here's a question for you. Here's a philosophical hypothesis or ponderance, is that can you think of any examples where it works the other way, where actually somebody's content is incredibly rich, yet it's not able to reach people because the delivery is so uninspiring? Well, I just think you need to look at the last 10 years of Labour MPs, right? I think about this a lot.
That's so true. No, that is so true.
Okay, so this is, we are dealing the kind of skills of oration and storytelling, or kind of, using the tone of your voice, is something that we experience on a day-to-day level. And the people who are successful are the people who have the tone of voice and the understanding of rhythm and how they use their voice to take people with them. It convinces people. And it's so, I think, we listen to that. I've heard it before. You'd never heard it before. You didn't understand anything that was going on, but you loved it. Right?
I understand that he wanted me to be excited about what he was feeling, that he wanted me to be greatly inspired by this very important message that he had to tell me. And that's captivating, right?
So it reminds me of a story. A friend of mine was a sound engineer at Earl's Court, and these Baptist ministers turned up. They were doing a big recording, and these guys hypnotized and wooed the audience using the rhythm of their voice. It was like they picked it up and pushed them at such a point that people were falling over in their droves just from the use of rhythm and the use of tone. And it's such a powerful tool.
So this idea that the storyteller and is also the hypnotist, right? Or the in the case of what you've just described there, the mass manipulator. Do you think there's ethical questions around that? I mean, what is that? I mean, clearly there's people in history that have had very, very persuasive styles of communication, styles of storytelling, where actually the content of what they've got to share is highly questionable.
Well, look at Hitler. He was a great public speaker.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was, you know, one of the things. And there was, I don't know if you've ever watched the Werner Herzog film about Klaus Kinski. It's called My Best Fiend.
No, I haven't. I'd love to see that.
You've got to watch it. It's a fantastic documentary. But Klaus Kinski was a strange man, right? And there was a point early on in his career, and it was after Hitler, where Kinski would stand up in stadiums. Thousands of people would come out, and Kinski would stand in stadiums and make these almost nonsensical speeches, but with great passion, right? It was just him on a stage with a microphone doing these very impassioned speeches, just talking gibberish in some ways. And people would gather in their droves and they would throw things at him and shout at him and berate him. And it almost seems like when you watch it, this kind of weird kickback against the spell that Hitler had managed to put over him.
Wow. And so he was knowingly providing a catharsism for that event. Or what do you think he thought was going on?
I think he was just an incredible egotist. I think he loved being on a stage and using his voice to hold the intention and the kind of the focus of so many people. But for the German public, it felt like it was this massive cathartic exercise of having someone who had this kind of very hypnotic and wooing kind of tone. And kicking back against it. It's very strange.
That's really fascinating. So that's like a cultural anger at the skill of rhetoric in itself being manifest in this. Yeah, wow.
And you look at the last period of time of people like Boris Johnson.
So I read a review of a book called Chums. I apologize that I forget the name of the author. But it was basically charting the schools at Eton that so many of our leaders and MPs on both sides of the political left and right divide have been through this school. And so they were talking about the debating club, okay, that is a big part of Eton tradition. He was basically saying that in order to encourage and teach the skills of rhetoric, it was very, very important for any speaker to not get too caught up in the details or the facts, to the point where you have this culture of where these people are debating. If one of the speakers veered too closely to actually stating facts about their argument, they would get heckled by the audience that would all go, facts, 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 and they'd have to stop talking and go back to the rhetoric. Wow. I just thought that was a beautiful vignette of political training. Right? Yeah. Of we don't care about the facts. What we want is the passion. What we want is the emotion. That will win the argument.
And it strikes me in both cases, there is something that bypasses the brain. There's something in this kind of style of storytelling. It's ancient and it gets you in the gut. And there's a reason why, we're talking about Lord Buckley, who was someone who was a performer and an artist. He was an artist and using it knowingly. And then we're holding it up as a light against, against politicians and ministers and those kind of things. But there's something archetypal. There's something just that basically, like in a very basic way, it gets you in the gut. The rhythm takes you over. The tone takes you over. And it doesn't matter what you're listening to. You believe it because you're swept along. And it is that feeling of being swept along with something,
Yeah.
So, and it's
a powerful
it's
current. Yeah,
it's a very powerful current. It's magic. It's the same way that, that a great soloist, and we're going back to the jazz thing, but a great soloist will play, and it doesn't matter if you understand it. You just feel it. It's the reason gospel music works so well. You just feel it.
Well, I mean, again, it's very musical, isn't it? Because and even, to use the more, certainly with jazz soloists, a lot of people reject jazz because they feel like they don't understand it. And I think that's a really interesting question of whether something like that is supposed to be understood, in air quotes, because there's lots of different ways to understand things, right? But feeling is something that you can do without understanding. But even if you took a more literal stance on, I don't know, something like Robert Plant, right? Great blues singer, wailing away, in his early 20s, late teens. I love Led Zeppelin, love a lot of those songs. Because of the style of his delivery, I can't tell you many of the words of any given songs. I know he's singing words, about woman or whatever, right? But more importantly, he's in a very tight pair of trousers and he's screaming something passionately at me. And I think in music, even when there are words, it's more... we're easier to forgive the idea that we don't pick up exactly, the lyrics of the song. We get the overall feeling and somehow we're happier with that, right?
Totally. I think there's no coincidence that he grew out of the cabaret scene. You can hear it in it. It's obviously a storytelling style that has been shaped by years of performance on stage. That's 20 years performing to audiences, and this is the shape of it.
Crazy character.
And apparently he used to spend a lot of his time, I've read a bit about him, but apparently he used to spend a lot of his time traveling from house to house, and he'd stay with people. And everyone kind of talks about him being this incredibly warm, generous, kind man. I think he was very loved. And there was a poem that he did towards the end of his life that is called People. It says, "People, you are the most extraordinary flowers, and it has been an unmitigated pleasure to walk in your garden." And it was so... I think there's such a generosity about him as a person.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Have you committed that to memory?
Yeah, I love it. As a piece of, as a little kind of vignette, the music in it, the performance of it is just gorgeous. But I think he was something quite special. And like I think we said at the start, this track specifically inspired the Beatles to write "Hey Jude." There's a line, where he's talking about Judas. He says, "Hey Jude, make it so," and they listened to that in the studio, and that became the basis and the inspiration for them writing "Hey Jude." So I think it's these figures, as avant-garde or as strange as they seem, have formed such an important part of popular culture everywhere,
What an interesting man. Perhaps we'll look at some more of his stuff in coming episodes. We definitely at some point want to circle back to Ken Nordine. I think there's more there. But interesting that the two couldn't really be more different, yet they both are such captivating storytellers, right?
Yeah. And I think... The fascinating thing in hearing both of them side by side for me is that we were talking a lot about how Nordine sat with music and placed his voice in unusual places on the beat, phrasing almost like a jazz musician. And the interesting thing of hearing Lord Buckley against that is he is the music. His voice is the rhythm, and the music sits underneath it. So it's almost two very different approaches, but both with very different outcomes, but both very musical approaches to storytelling.
That central point to me of actually you can have excellent communicators, superb storytellers, and an audience doesn't understand a single word they've been told. To me, that's incredibly fascinating, right?
Yeah.
The psychology around that and the fact that happens in everyday life and happens in politics, and fucking wars are launched and...
Yeah.
Dynasties are born on the back of someone being interesting to listen to, right?
Yeah. And it's happened. It's happened for so long, right? That's how people get power, is by using the voice. And I mean, people use story as well. You can't take that away. You look at religions and you look at the things that they're based upon, and L. Ron Hubbard, like things like that. You look at Scientology, and they're stories to create power, or they're storytelling or oration to create power.
Yeah. Well, and I think the idea of, creating power is an interesting phrase, because I would have gone for something, I agree with you, but I would have gone for something more like it creates feelings, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's always the nefarious motivation behind it. But I think there's something so fundamental to being human, communicating and telling stories, that essentially we're back to this word empathy again. You're trying to excite or instill empathy in someone. You're trying to make a relation to them, make a connection with them. And I think in the darker examples of what you're describing, perhaps people are trying to reach other people's anxieties or, talk about subconscious problems, address them in a way that offers salvation, offers relief. In the case of the preachers that you were talking about, if you would just get out your debit card and make a donation to the Church of Good Story.
But I mean, look at, politically thinking, that's how people get power. You look at the people who've held power in this country over the last period of time, and they're all good orators. They're all conscious, aware of what they do. Like Farage, he's a good storyteller.
Farage loves the sound of his own voice. And I mean, Trump is the elephant, the orange elephant in the room that perhaps we're not talking about, in the sense that his ability to speak lyrically and to tell a good story and to give people nicknames, but say nothing at all. No content. Yeah, it's remarkable, right? And people love him for that. And then you get this curious phrase. I mean, I'm jumping back and forth across the ocean here, but you get that curious phrase. I think it was around Brexit. Was it Gove that said people are sick and tired of listening to experts? Yeah. Which has much been laughed about. But I think perhaps what he meant by that, and in a way he was, I guess, trying to be honest, and I think there's definitely truth in it, is that actually people want to be inspired. People want to be excited by their leaders. They don't want to listen to dry, sensible facts and information, which is kind of terrifying But then to dig down into that, when we're talking about you want to be inspired, or is what we're saying that we want to be taken on this kind of journey, that we want to be carried along and swept along by the rhythm of a voice, by the tone of a voice. We want to, because the tone of a voice gives you the trust, right? So we've had that with Nordine and with Lord Buckley in some ways, that the tone of a voice gives you this sense of, I trust this person because they're landed in their own body. And then the rhythm of it, as we see with Buckley, gives you this kind of sense that you're being pulled along on a journey. So is that what we're talking about? You know, is it, when we're talking about being inspired, being that we trust and inspire someone and great leadership, we're actually talking about something that's actually quite musical. Wow. Yeah. Trust is a really interesting word, isn't it? Because yes, I think trust is very important in the storyteller that you respect and that you admire. And also this sense of being pulled along, I think, is very musical, but also culturally, it's so necessary, you know, that we have leaders that offer some kind of vision of where all of this is going. Elon Musk, I find to be an interesting character. But what seems to me to be so fascinating by him is that whenever I've seen him in interview, he seems completely unbelievable in the sense that he's lacking some fundamental storytelling skills. Lauded as this great man of science, you know, this great engineer. Yet it seems amazing to me that someone could get into that level of power without having that silver tongue, you know, to tell a good story, to make me feel something about the vision that they have for the future or whatever it is. And I get curiously the same thing with Biden, in that clearly there's someone that has perhaps passed his prime of public speaking, or, you know, he doesn't deliver very well in that sphere. I don't know what you think about that. Yeah, but I think with Biden it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it was almost a point in time where they wanted the antithesis of Trump. He's the anti-Trump. Yeah. Sure. And so it was like, actually, we've given over ourselves to this and we've lost our trust. And so we need someone who's a safe pair of hands. And a safe pair of hands is someone who speaks very slowly, who doesn't push with the rhythm, who speaks in a very kind of gentle tone. Yeah. And so it's almost,
potentially in a kind of auditory sense, the opposite of what of what's been received.
Isn't that fascinating? And then back to the Klaus Kinski idea of being a German, and I mean, whatever was going through his head, but the idea of the German people actively being angry that they've been fooled by or misled by passionate rhetoric. You know, that I find really, really fascinating. You know, because stories are dangerous in that way, aren't they?
They are, and essentially what Kinski was doing was copying the cadence of Hitler. You know, he was copying, and he would stand there shouting back at people, and it was this kind of cathartic experience on both sides. But I think there's something fascinating if you take all the words out of it. If you take a story, take a storyteller, take a narrator, take all the words out of it, and take all the personality out of it in some ways, and just have it as literally the music and the rhythm of the voice and the tone of the voice, then what happens to it?
Okay. Let's wrap it up. We will be back again very soon with a new episode of the Why Tell Stories podcast. This one has been slightly more challenging for some technical reasons, but mainly because he's a slippery eel, I think, Lord Buckley. I'm going to endeavour to find out a little bit more about him, and perhaps we can revisit him at another point. If it's the first time that you've heard him, as it was for me, then I recommend, if you're listening on certain podcast players, you can access the time codes in the show notes, which will take you directly to the story. Listen to that again. I will be, for sure, seeing what sense I can make out of it. As ever, please do get in touch with us if you are moved by the show. If you've got any kind of feedback, you can hit us up on any of the social media places. You can also get us at info@academicpodcastagency.com. What's next for him, Dan? What should we look at in the next episode?
How about we have a listen to, this is a bit of a strange one. It was a record that was put out in the 50s and was a big hit at the time, and it's by the Gordon Jenkins Orchestra, and it's a piece called Manhattan Tower, which is a kind of pretty experimental radio play using voice and orchestra.
Okay, that sounds very intriguing. All right, let's set that up for the next episode.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
Thanks,
Dan,
Rob.
really good to see you. And
Good to see you too.
see you on the next episode. All right.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.